everyone, I'm Claire, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Holo Taco's collab with Safiya Nygaard. I know this collection came out almost 3 years ago at this point, but there are a couple reasons I'm reviewing it now. One is that I hadn't started my channel yet when this collection first came out. It's the collection that got me into nail polish. And the other is that I'm pretty sure we're getting a part 2 of this collab later this year. It hasn't been confirmed yet when I'm filming this, but there have been some hints. I'm guessing it'll come out in October because Holo Taco isn't doing Simply Nailogical birthday polishes anymore, which leaves them open to do a collab collection. And Safiya's vibe definitely fits in with spooky season. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My plan for this video is to show swatches and talk about the polishes, then get into some thoughts on the collection as a whole, and how it was as a first collection for someone just starting with nail polish. And then I'll share some predictions for what I think could be included in a possible part 2. So let's get into it. Holo Taco is a boutique nail polish brand based in the US and founded by Christine from the Simply Nailogical YouTube channel. And one of her YouTube friends is Safiya Nygaard, who makes content about cosmetics, fashion, travel, mixing stuff together, aka frankening, among other things. They first did collab videos in, I think, 2017, and seem to have actually become friends outside of YouTube, so it's not surprising that Safiya is one of the 3 entities that Holo Taco has collabed with, and I'm also not surprised that she's the first one to potentially get a part 2. The first collab came out in September 2023. It was made up of 5 polishes, which came in custom cartons and a collection box. There was also a nail file, which I did get, and some loose bat-shaped glitters, which I skipped. For my swatches, I'll start with Feeling Fiendish, which is the one cream from the collection. It's kind of a muted, medium pinkish purple, and matches the color that Safiya uses in a lot of her branding and merch. This was also the first polish to be revealed. Safiya and Christine gave away a few hundred bottles during meet and greets a couple of months before the rest of the collection came out. And it's a nice cream, classic Holo Taco formula where you could probably get away with one thick coat in a pinch since it has good opacity. But my first coat was on the thinner side, so I definitely needed a second, and that got it to a good place. And this is a pretty color, a good balance between saturated and muted, but it's not a color I would have necessarily picked if it weren't part of this collection. Just not my favorite shade of purple. I did get some use out of it in the first few months of painting my nails when I didn't have as many polishes to pick from, but at this point it mostly gets brought out for my yearly skittle of this collection. Though to be fair, creams are generally some of the lesser used polishes in my collection. So it's certainly not a bad polish, and I can see why they included it. In some ways, it would have been nice to see all specialty finish polishes. A cream just isn't that exciting in a collab collection, but it also makes sense if you want to highlight a specific color, so I'm not mad at it. The other color they kind of had to do was black, since Safiya is known for wearing all black and describes her aesthetic as comfortable vampire. So we got the polish Bat Bitch, which has a black base and very subtle blue shimmer. And this was definitely the formula I struggled with the most when I was new to painting my nails. It's a polish that starts out sheer and works best built up in thin coats, but I would end up doing thicker coats, I think at least partly because I wasn't used to using polishes that look so different in the first coat compared to how they look in the bottle. So I was putting more polish on my nail than I should have been, trying to get that black color from the first coat. And it also just has a thick formula and is hard to do thin coats with. There were a couple times that I had to take it off and start over because it got too gloopy and wasn't drying well. But now I probably have added some thinner in there at some point, and I know that I just have to be okay with doing thin coats that look bad at first, because it does eventually look okay once I've done 3 coats. In person, the shimmer isn't super noticeable unless you're looking for it, but it does make the polish seem a bit shinier than a black cream. I remember that during the launch livestream, Safiya was talking about how they kind of struggled making a black polish because if they added too much shimmer or anything else to it, it wouldn't read as just black anymore. And I think at that point, Holo Taco had already made black versions of a lot of their core formulas. A cream, of course, a linear holo, a frosted metal, a holo glitter. so they couldn't do any of those, and the subtle shimmer was one of the options that made the most sense. So I see why they picked it, and I know some people like the vibe of a mostly black polish with just a little something extra, but it's not my preference, especially when the formula isn't that good. Like, why would I wear a 3-coat mostly black polish when 1-coat black is right there? And I just tend to prefer when the sparkly elements in polish are a little bolder and stand out enough that I don't have to look really close to see them. So Bat Bitch is potentially my least favorite from the collection. I don't think it looks bad, but it doesn't perform very well. Then one of my favorites is Bury Me in Holo, a muted red in the crushed holo formula. So it has tiny holographic flakes in a buildable, jelly-ish base. This swatch is older than the others. I swatched it last year for a video and didn't feel like redoing it, even though my application wasn't the best. But once I did a little cleanup, you can see that the first coat did go on pretty evenly, just slightly sheer. And it looked pretty passable on the second coat, but it still had a little bit of sheerness, so I did a third, and that got it almost fully opaque. This is another color that I wasn't surprised to see in the collection. Safiya is known for her mixing experiments, most famously melting together every lipstick from Sephora to see what the color would be. And it turned out to be a berry color, which they called Bury Me in Lipsticks. And a couple of her other experiments, like mixing all the lip gloss from Sephora or all the hand sanitizer from Bath & Body Works, also kind of ended up in this color range. So it made sense to see that color in this collection, and I feel like the crushed holo finish works well for the shimmery, sparkly lip gloss vibe. I wasn't necessarily expecting this polish to be my favorite from the collection. It's not the one that got the most hype, but the first time I wore it as part of a skittle with the rest of the collection, I was like, this is nice. And not just because I had an easier time with application compared to the previous polish, but it was my first crushed holo, and it turns out I really like them. They have a great visual texture. And I like the color too. I'm not always that into reds, but this slightly muted version is really nice. It works as that work-appropriate neutral lipstick color, but the finish means that it's not plain. It's not my most worn polish from the collection, but I do enjoy it anytime I wear it. Next up is Brucie, another lipstick-inspired shade, though you probably wouldn't guess that from the muted teal color. In this case, I think the color came from a video where Safiya had a lipstick palette that let her mix any color, and one of the ones that she did was a grayish teal. As far as the finish, it's a linear holo, though I do feel like it has a bit more going on than just linear holo in a base color. I don't think the description mentioned anything beyond that, but it almost looks like it has a gray base, and the teal aspect comes from an additional shimmer. I think that appearance is exaggerated on camera, but I was seeing the different elements in person too. It does apply similarly to Holo Taco's other dark linear holos. It's very pigmented, so it has good opacity. There was some patchiness in my first thin coat, but the second took care of that, so I stopped there. And I do like this polish. You might know that I'm not the biggest fan of teal, but darker shades can be an exception. I like using it in December because it's a good spruce color. And I know some people thought it was too close to the linear holos from the Dark Rainbow collection, but I don't really think so. Yeah, the color falls somewhere in between the blue and the green, Sunken Secrets, and Lost in the Woods, but it's not that close to either of them. Like, I have Lost in the Woods, and it's definitely green and not teal. Plus, Brucie is much more muted. It has that gray undertone, so I think it is unique in the Holo Taco catalog. And last is Spirit Fingers, which is a cool-toned gray crelly with pink to red to gold shimmer. And it applied really nicely, pretty even coverage on that first coat, but I did have to do 3 coats to build up that base color to get it to look opaque in most lighting. Though I think you could also get away with 2 thicker coats, especially on shorter nails. And I don't think this polish really had a specific inspiration from Safiya's life or her content, aside from the general spooky vibes. I think they just made it because it looks cool. And it ended up being by far the most popular polish from the collection. Like, first to go out of stock, I think, highest seller, the one people still pine for if they missed it. And I'm not sure exactly why. I do enjoy it, don't get me wrong. It's probably my second favorite from this collection. It's a nice color combo, but I don't know if it's that special. Other brands have put out a red or a pink shimmer in a gray base. But thinking about it, I guess there are some ways to explain the hype. One is FOMO, or whatever it's called when you're not just afraid of missing something and you actually do miss it. It had a limited window of availability, so it feels more special than other similar polishes. Also, when it came out, it was unique for Holo Taco. They hadn't done that many shimmer polishes, and I don't think they had done any in this style with acrylic base. So especially for Holo Taco customers who don't shop as much from other brands, Spirit Fingers did feel very new and unique. And even though they've gone on to do a lot more in this finish, the first one is always going to feel special. So I guess I do kind of understand why Spirit Fingers has the reputation it does, but it's more about the context around the polish than the polish itself. So if you missed it, there are a lot of options for other polishes to potentially fill that void, provided that you don't care if they're from this collab. But yeah, those are all the polishes from the Safiya x Holo Taco collab. I think you can tell how I feel about them. Bury Me in Hollow and Spirit Fingers are a couple of my favorites. Brucie is also nice. Feeling Fiendish is a good cream, even if I don't use it that much. And Bat Bitch is just not what I want it to be. But now I want to talk about the collection in general, the color story, the finishes, the theme, and what it was like for it to be my first big nail polish purchase. So, the color story. To be honest, I wouldn't really call it cohesive. I do wear these polishes all together as a Skittle every year, but only because they came from the same collection. Otherwise, I wouldn't think to put them together. But it's also not the least cohesive collection ever. The colors are all on the muted side, some of them have a gray undertone, and I feel like there are some good pairings if you want to do a main color and an accent color, like the shimmer in Spirit Fingers works well with the base of Bury Me in Hollow. Brucie's shade of teal looks nice with the blue shimmer in Bat Bitch, and Bat Bitch works with the rest of the polishes too, since black goes with everything. But really, this collection could be even less cohesive, and I wouldn't mind too much because of the type of collection that it is. It's a collab, so the polishes, for the most part, are inspired by different aspects of Safiya's videos and her aesthetic, so that means there's going to end up being some variety. The colors that she likes to wear won't necessarily match the color of all lipsticks mixed together. And considering that, I think the collection has a good balance between colors that make sense for the inspiration and colors that make sense together. For the finishes, we got a good variety. A cream, 2 different kinds of holo, 2 different kinds of shimmer. I think I remember from the launch livestream that they said Safiya wasn't as drawn to flashy, glittery polishes, so they went with these more low-key formulas that are still really pretty. Like I said before, a cream isn't the most exciting finish to include in a collab, but considering that the first collab Holo Taco did was mostly creams, I'm happy with the variety we got here. Not much else to say. And not a lot to say about the theme either. A collab collection is always going to be themed around the collab partner, and I think I mentioned all the specific inspirations as I was talking about each polish. Of course, you can always point out other things they could have been inspired by, like the Decade Fashion series or international travel videos, but I think they covered the most obvious options and the ones that most clearly had a color associated with them. Like, it's a lot easier to make a polish in the color of a lipstick than in the color of going to Japan. So definitely no complaints there. And overall, this was a very good collection to have as an entry into the hobby. I think I talked about this in my Why I Only Buy Nail Polish from 4 Brands video, but it probably doesn't hurt to mention again. I liked nail polish before buying this collection, but I didn't wear it very much. I remember when I was in college, I dressed up as Scarlet Witch for Halloween and bought a drugstore black nail polish for that, and it didn't apply very well, but I really liked how it looked, so I started to wear nail polish a bit more that fall. But I was frustrated by 2 things. One was how fast it chipped. I remember especially when I would wash my hair, I would get a ton of tip wear and chipping. And the other was that my nails would get really damaged by acetone. They would get dried out and start peeling if I wore and removed polish too often. So I kind of gave up on nail polish for a few years because it didn't really feel worth it. But then this collection was announced in the summer of 2023, and as a big fan of Safiya, I knew I wanted to get it. But there were a couple months between that announcement and the actual launch, which means I was trying to figure out where to direct my excitement. And I ended up watching a lot of Simply Nailogical videos for the first time. I was aware of her before because of her collab videos with Safiya, but I hadn't watched many of her regular videos. So watching those, I learned for the first time about base coat and top coat, and other strategies for keeping your nail polish on. I learned about nail oil, and all of that meant that when I got the Safiya collection in the mail and painted my nails for the first time in years, those previous frustrations were no longer an issue. My polish stayed on, my nails didn't peel, and I've been able to consistently enjoy this hobby for the last 3 years. But it wasn't just that I had learned how to successfully paint my nails, it was also the polishes themselves. I think this was a pretty good collection for a beginner. There was decent color variety, from neutrals to some slightly brighter shades. A big thing was the variety of finishes. I discovered how a nice opaque cream should apply. I was able to try a linear holo and a crushed holo, which are some of Holo Taco's core formulas. And I was able to figure out that I like a Spirit Fingers type shimmer more than a Bat Bitch type shimmer. And the formulas, with the exception of Bat Bitch, were pretty beginner friendly. I didn't have to deal with learning to apply a magnetic while also just getting used to painting my nails. I didn't have to deal with removing flakes or glitter. I don't know if more advanced finishes would have changed my experience that much. I probably still would have gotten invested in this hobby, but either way, this was a good assortment of polishes to try. And for anyone getting into nail polish, I do think trying a cream, a linear holo, and a shimmer is a good place to start. So that's about all I have for the 2023 Safiya collection. I would not have bought that assortment of polishes if they weren't part of a collab with her, but I'm glad I did get them because they're good polishes, and without them, I probably wouldn't be part of the nail polish community today. Alright, it's the next day, and there's one last thing I want to do in this video, which is talk about some predictions for a part 2 of the collab. Like I said before, as of filming, we have not gotten an official announcement about another Safiya collection, but there have been some hints. I think it was maybe the launch stream for the Pop of Holo collection that I was like, that sounds like a pretty strong indication for Safiya Part 2, but I don't remember for sure, and I don't feel like going through the hours of stream to find the exact quote. I'll leave that to the Holo Taco detectives. But anyway, just thought it would be fun to mention some things I think could be included in a part 2 whenever that happens. Not saying all these things will definitely be there, but these are some ideas I think they could possibly draw from. One of my guesses that I'm more confident about is a Spirit Fingers sibling, by which I mean a polish with a similar base but different shimmer. It was the most popular polish from the collection, so I can definitely see them doing a variation. They have 2 polishes already that I would consider Spirit Fingers siblings. Alien Infatuation has a more neutral gray base and green shimmer, and Secret Society has a warm gray base and gold shimmer. So for this collection, maybe they would go with a cyan, or a blue, or a purple. I think those could be very pretty and ghostly. And then I think there's a good chance they'll do a black-based polish again, hopefully with a little more going on this time. They could do a flaky, another shimmer, but what I think would be fun is a thermal that's black or close to black in the cold state. They could go monochrome with a black to gray or black to clear, or a black to purple could fit the vibe. I've definitely seen some of those, so I know the pigment exists. And hopefully they would also include some type of shimmer or flake or holo so that it's not just a plain cream thermal. I'm also kind of expecting them to do another teal, since it seems like it's one of Safiya's favorite colors other than black. In some of her videos, I noticed that she's wearing the teal from the most recent Holo Taco collection, so I won't be surprised if that's another color they go back to. The only issue is that Holo Taco has done so many teals because it's a customer favorite color as well, so I'm not really sure what finish they could do that wouldn't feel repetitive. But I'm sure they could figure something out with a different shade of teal or combining a couple different formulas. I also wouldn't be surprised to see a crushed holo again, because that seems to be another type of polish Safiya enjoys based on her videos. I think I've seen her wearing sparkling spurs from the Disco Cowboy collection, and of course Bury Me in Holo from her own collection. So that could be something else they bring back. And I wonder if they might do a topper. In the first collab, they did the loose bat glitters because they couldn't get the bats to work in a topper, but at this point, Holo Taco is more experienced with chunky glitter toppers, so I feel like there's a small chance they would try again. And even if the bats still don't work, they could do some sort of celestial moon and stars topper. I feel like that would fit the vibe. And pivoting from formula and color to polish inspiration, there are a couple things I think they could pull from based on what Safiya has done in her videos since the last collab. I think the one Franken experiment that makes sense for the timeline is the giant Yankee candle, which was a nice shade of brown, so not necessarily the most exciting color, but an option. And I like brown, so I'd be happy if they did that. Then there are the travel videos, like the return to Las Vegas for more celebrity chef restaurant reviews, and the trip they did to Singapore and Malaysia. All pretty open-ended and could go in a lot of different directions. So I guess if I do want to give a full proposal for the collection, I'll say a Spirit Fingers sibling with indigo shimmer, a black to purple thermal with pink shimmer to bring it closer to that feeling fiendish color, a crushed hollow in the Franken candle color, though now that I think about it, that might be a little too close to some of the polishes from the Barista collection, a teal with a more complex finish like flakes and shimmer and hollow, a pink polish named for going prawning during their all-nighter in Singapore, since that would also tie in with Safiya's Shrimply nickname for Christine, and a moon, stars, and bats topper. That is 6 polishes, and they did 5 last time, but I feel like lately they've been more willing to do larger collections. But don't quote me on any of this, it's just a guess. And actually, after writing most of the script for this video, I was rewatching a Safiya video where I noticed her wearing some different shimmer polishes that I don't necessarily recognize, which could be prototypes and don't really align with most of what I said here, so there's that. If you want to see people making guesses based on screenshots and not just vibes, that's where the Holo Taco detectives and their Discord server come in. So that's it for my predictions, which means I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you to everyone who's watching till the end. It was fun to take a look back at this older collection. Let me know in the comments if you have the Safiya collab, what you think of it, and what you'd like to see in a part 2. And if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would leave me a like or maybe even subscribe. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!